Hello, everybody, and we're back. This is Dwight with the Broken Brain Podcast and Innovate Mental Health. I am here to do another RPG review for therapy, and this time it's going to be about a solo game that was developed for individual storytelling, and/or you could call that journaling in therapy speak, which is something that we're going to be. In fact, I think it's called that in the thing as well. But this is a fascinating game that is brought to us by The Other Dev. That's one word, The Other Dev, D-E-V. The Other Dev Productions, and you can find them on Drive-Thru RPG or other places. And they make a lot of things that are available for a really fair price, really fair price for what they are. They also have one called You Are the Dungeon and a whole bunch of other role-playing games. I think this one was coming in at, it's basically pay. You can decide what you're paying for it. Basically a contribution. I think the suggested price is about $7 or $8 for the basis of it. Now, like I said, this is a solo game, which I've been using a little bit more and getting to know a little bit more when it comes to therapy. The purpose of these reviews is to go over some of the ways that I'm applying RPGs and RPG adjacent gameplay to help people with therapeutic goals. And so today is no exception. Obviously, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about it in 3 sections. We're going to talk about how to play the game. Then I'll give you some like pros and cons and if I like it kind of thing. And then we'll get into the applications that you could have for your therapy. So You're the Tavern comes in a 16-page, actually. And the reason that it is 16 pages, by the way, for like a small price like it is for this is actually, I mean, there's a lot here that actually what it should tell you is it walks you through a lot of processes of how to make this game work. The idea behind this game, the premise is that you are inhabiting the identity of a tavern. Now, it encourages you to get imaginative over what a tavern means. Is this like a Middle Ages D&D style gathering place? That's kind of what it's built around. Or is it a bar in the middle of space on a meteorite, like a Kid Cosmic type of situation, a diner or something like that? Is it an Old West saloon? And then you can kind of do hacks or redos or rewrites for your own purpose. Of course, you always can, but this lends itself to it quite a bit. As it is a solo game, the idea is that you're going to, within certain randomizers, you are going to tell stories. The premise, once again, is that a tavern is a gathering place where people gather and they do tell stories. And so as a tavern, you're going to experience or tell these stories as they go. So it's something to provoke insight in the sense of imagination and fun and creative kind of endeavors like that. I'm going to tell you a little bit how it works. And it will tell you there's well, basically 2 kinds of randomizers that you're going to experience. One of them is dice. I just lost all those for visual aid purposes. And the other randomizer is actually going to be tarot cards. So you can, you grab a deck of tarot cards, or you can find both of those things, by the way, online. So if you want to carry a little notebook around with you, and when you have a moment and you don't feel like doom scrolling, or when you do feel like doom scrolling and you decided you are going to try to avoid doom scrolling, you can pull up apps on your phone or websites too. They have these where you can roll a dice of any kind, and you can also deal yourself tarot cards. Here's the way I did it. I actually took a notebook that I had laying around. I always have several notebooks laying around, and I went through, I printed out the pages, and then I actually cut some things out and I just glue sticked them. That's how you say that's a verb, into this notebook in different areas, so that when I have the notebook, I could carry around the guidelines and the structures to sort of remind myself how it works. You might find that your brain doesn't need that. Mine does. It encourages you to start what they call the first story, where you are going to decide what your tavern is, how it got founded, who started it, or who purchased it, or where you start in the story. This is left completely to your imagination. This one is not necessarily meant to be guided by any of the guiding randomizers. And then you go through there and you start to tell a story. You can write this down in some kind of chronological order. You can create a timeline. It doesn't really matter. Or you can just say, hey, these stories kind of happen here and there and here and there. You can make the stories tie in together with similar characters or a similar landscape. It encourages you to make a little drawing of here's the area and here's what you learn about the landscape. But you opt in or opt out to any of these details. It kind of helps. So what they do is, and I've got little highlights to remind me where it is. You can see what they call the Tavern through time. When you start a story, they're going to have you roll one of these. It looks like a little pyramid. It's called a D4. You may be familiar. You roll that and see what you get. 1 through 4 is going to tell you which of the 4 seasons this story takes place in. Then it has you roll a D6, this little friend that you know from every game ever, pretty much, that uses a dice. You roll that to tell yourself how many characters, how many people are in the story or telling the story. You can kind of decide that. And whatever number you get is how many tarot cards you're going to pull out. Then there is a big old chart called The People. And you go through and you can see it's small type here, but it goes through and assigns a person to each kind of tarot card. So for example, if I pull out 3 cards and I pull up, let's say, the 5 of Cups, it says here that's a grieving laborer. And then maybe the 4 of Cups, by the way, is an apathetic shepherd. That might be kind of fun. You've got the 2 of Pentacles would go with an adept apprentice. The 8 of Wands is a quick assassin. You get it. So the idea, once again, with randomizers is it is a control and structure to funnel your imagination and to provoke storytelling and thoughts like that. And then you just kind of tell the story. Oh, one other thing. Sorry. They do have you then roll a D8 and a D10, which are over here. Anyway, you roll those, lose them forever. And I will tell you what events and subjects. For example, you've got basically 8 areas: life, love, death, hate, those kinds of things, bounty, loss, joy, horror. Within those, there is a sub listing of 8 to 10 each that tell you. So if I rolled a 5, for example, I would be telling a story related to bounty. If I got a 5, it would say a visit from a kind fairy. If I rolled loss, it could also go to, your homes were destroyed, or a herd was lost to a dragon, that kind of thing. So you can see where it kind of goes, and then you sit down and you write a story within this framework. There's even story creation sheets for you to fill out to say, here's all the details, the framework, right on the same page, and then go from there. Or you can just jot it down, or however you do it is how you do it. That's one of the pros of this game. Let's get into that. This is very interesting. I think it's a really cool game because it once again gives you something to do instead of just sitting and doom scrolling. If you set this up, you can set it all up on your phone if you put the notes app in and know that kind of a thing. Or once again, you can carry a notebook or grab a sheet of paper. You often can do that somewhere or something like that. So if this is something that you are in a place where you're waiting and usually would pull out your phone and you're trying to break some of the social media's habits, then that's actually a big pro to this. The other pro kind of leads into the therapy stuff, which is that journaling is healthy, whether you're writing about yourself or, in this case, writing about someone else. I'll tell you in a minute why that can be actually healthy, when usually when we say journaling, we only think about writing down about our own feelings in realistic time or whatever of what we're having. That's very healthy, but this can help to overcome some of the obstacles people have to do it. Real quick, are there any cons to this? No, not really. You could even adapt it to play with other people. So I don't know that there's any real negatives about this game that I found, unless you just don't like storytelling and writing on your own. I guess then you wouldn't like it. Therapeutically, journaling, as I put before, has long been a part of cognitive psychology and other forms of therapy that people are encouraged to write down their feelings. One of the biggest obstacles is people don't follow through on it. It's a little hard to remember if you're not a writer by nature. And also, the other thing is, with cognitive psychology techniques, sometimes when we get stuck in our head, it's a little hard to shake loose some of our emotions, and it can be distracting. So doing something that is sort of nonlinear can sometimes shake that loose. And sometimes reading fiction or looking at things that you identify with passions, whatever fandoms or other things like that. If you can find a creative outlet, sometimes that allows you to access your emotions a different way. So I've been doing this. I tried it out, and I've written 3 or 4 stories. I think 3.5 would probably be what I'd call it so far. And I'll tell you what, actually, this is something that I'm going to keep doing it because it's a lot of fun, and it gets you to start thinking about things in a very different way. When I wrote the first story, for example, I just made up I made up a group of, like, let's say, bandits who decided to open a tavern because it was safer and because they wanted to give up this kind of life of crime that they'd been forced into, and kind of making up a story like that. That's not a super original story. But when I thought about it, I looked back over it, and it actually led to, I threw in a couple things there that just kind of came to my mind as I was working within the framework, especially as I went to the next stories about other people. And what I found was there's some things in there about grief, about loss. They weren't necessarily ripped from my life, but some of them were related. And it was an interesting way to work through some thoughts and feelings in a way that was fun. One of the reasons that I like to use role-playing games and other games in therapy, and I'm doing more and more of that, is because when you're doing something for health, if it's fun, you're more likely to do it. And there's been lots of research about that with video games, with other games, that those that are designed just for therapeutic purposes actually can be less effective. And the main reason is probably because people don't do them. They're not as fun. If you do it and they are fun, great. But this is why I like to adapt existing things that already are made for fun. Well, to see other reviews, you can watch here if you're watching on the YouTube channel, or you can go to dwighthurst.com/RPG to see more of that. And also, if you do go there, you'll be able to read about and, join, if you want, some of the work I'm doing, both kind of learning and researching about this, and in application, I'm putting together some groups for people to work through trauma, to work through addiction, to work through other emotions through the use of character creation and group community building, or in individual therapy, such as journaling and things like this. You can do a lot of that kind of stuff on your own, but having it go through some of the techniques that people are developing to tie it in with mental health. Also great for social skill development. I do a weekly social skill group for teens, in person and online, where we use a lot of these things. And I'll tell you what, it works a lot better than when we used to just do social skills lessons. So firsthand experience. I will probably report back if I end up using this. I've got a couple of clients that are looking at this as something that might be helpful to them, and I will give their feedback as they give permission and as it goes through. So I'll see you again soon for another RPG review for therapy. Until